Coming up, Cam Thomas duels with Jordan Poole. Big shots and monster blocks abound as the Brooklyn Nets take down the Washington Wizards in overtime. We dive in on all the key moments coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the winning Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Adam Armbrecht. There is no Doug Norrie, but we always thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. And where we get started, folks, is with another Brooklyn Nets victory. How about that? Back-to-back here, 122-119 over the Washington Wizards. It takes overtime, as only you would expect from the Brooklyn Nets. And it all starts with one Cam Thomas. We're going to talk about Nicholas Claxton here. We're going to talk about Trendon Watford and Mikal Bridges. But obviously, this was about Cam Thomas getting back on the court after having some back soreness, missing a game, was questionable coming in, ultimately gets cleared, ultimately plays, and ultimately is exactly what the Brooklyn Nets needed in order to get this victory. 45 minutes, including the overtime session, 14 of 27, 2 of 6, just 2 of 6 from deep, 8 of 8 getting to the line perfectly, 7 assists to go along with his 2 rebounds, and 38 monster points. You know, we talk about this, obviously, and we spent not only the last game after the win talking about some of the young players, which we'll also get to here along the way. We talk about Sean Marks and what the future looks like and whether or not he should be at the helm. But hey, you get credit for drafting Cam Thomas. You get a little bit of the blame for taking some time maybe to get him into the rotation and let this kid start to cook. But when Cam Thomas comes out in this one and gives you 24 first half points to go along with 5 assists, he was really doing it at all 3 levels for the Brooklyn Nets tonight. And then he kicks in the extra 4 there after having a 10-point second half. He does slow down a little bit, right? Adjustments defensively from Washington, starting to put some of those double teams and blitzing actions at him, forcing the ball out of his hands, asking others to have to step up, and some were able to do so. But then in the overtime, he gets a couple of nice buckets there, obviously, to help the Nets get over the hurdle here and take care of the game against the Wizards on the road. But 24 first half points. And we started to see this, right? We asked the question a handful of episodes ago, can Cam Thomas be a superstar? And the other thing that we've often asked coming out of games and even ahead of games sometimes is when you look at the Brooklyn Nets and they step onto the court, go ahead and start to create your hierarchy of who are the best players on the court. And how long does it take before you get to a Brooklyn Net? Now, frankly, Jordan Poole wakes up in a big way in the second half of this game, and it really does become a battle in this one as they finish with 38 points apiece, him and Cam Thomas. But you could make the case that Cam Thomas, especially in the first half, was the best player on the court. And we rarely get to say that about the Brooklyn Nets, and as good as Cam Thomas is starting and continuing to show us that he can be. But he was the best player. He was dominant. He was doing everything that we've seen him do and also doing it while having the ball in his hands, right? So having to be the primary ball handler, having to read the defenses, make the right decisions. And early in this game, you saw a real balance. You know, I know by the time we get to the first half here, we talk about 24 and 5. So yes, he's doing all the work that you expect him to be doing as far as shooting and scoring, driving to the basket, getting to the free throw line. But don't diminish that disparity there, because there were several key sequences and even a couple here that you could say, if for a knockdown wide open look by Dorian Finney-Smith, by Mikal Bridges in the second half, we could be talking about Cam Thomas having closer to 9 or even 10 assists in this game overall. So he's reading the defenses, he's reacting as he needs to, and then he's either getting at the basket, making it happen for himself, creating space for his own shots, or finding shooters, finding others on the floor here. And while we won't talk about Mikal Bridges at great length in this, short of saying that I think we start to see a bit of a role here, early in this game, it was the work of Cam Thomas that made Mikal Bridges' life a lot easier in this one. When he finishes, 7 of 16, 3 of 9. So he ends up being a little bit stronger in the first half from beyond the arc than he finishes, but 19 points. And it's a quiet game overall for him, as has been the case in more often than not of late. But he got his points throughout the course of the game. This isn't garbage time minutes. This isn't after you've either lost or maybe you're already up by a handful of points here and you kind of put in a little go-ahead bucket that isn't really consequential. He found his rhythm because Cam Thomas was doing the work, and the gravity of his game meant that Mikal Bridges could play smart basketball, find the open spaces on the floor, and make himself available. I mean, listen, I don't want to simplify things here for what Mikal Bridges' role is right now, but he needs Cam Thomas to be Cam Thomas to make his life easier. And Cam Thomas makes everybody's life easier. Finding Nicholas Claxton in and around the basket. My goodness, that absolute beautiful alley-oop where Claxton goes ahead and does a little reverse putback. I think that's going into the third quarter there, maybe, when they actually make that connection. But all those key sequences really matter. So tremendous growth, obviously, from Cam Thomas over the course of this season. And when you're shooting nearly 50% from the field, you've had a heck of a night for yourself, even if things cooled down. We say a 10-point second half for him, 4 clutch points in that overtime session helps get the Brooklyn Nets across the line. Without him, you're not making anything happen in this game. When we could all understand that. And interestingly enough, just from a high level, before we talk about clutch key sequences down the stretch of this game where Nicholas Claxton played a role, and then also Trendon Watford, who was absolutely critical in the second half of this game for this team, Brooklyn Nets, being able to get themselves back on a run, get themselves into back into a bit of a rhythm here. Remember, when you look at the team stats for this game, it is very rare that we talk about the Brooklyn Nets shooting 30% from beyond the arc and winning a basketball game. Even more rare is them shooting 30% while the opposition is shooting over 40%, 41% for the Wizards in this game, right? So the fact that you're struggling from deep, you're not getting some of those clutch contributions in some of those easy moments, you still find a way to win. The only way you find a way to win is by having someone who gives, if he's not a superstar, gives a superstar level performance. Cam Thomas, absolutely monstrous here. So coming up in a second, let's talk about Trendon Watford. Let's talk about the clutch moments at the end of the fourth quarter and in overtime that Nicholas Claxton helped to make sure that Brooklyn was going to get out of there with the victory. We'll also talk about those critical lottery ping pong balls at the back end of this one, and also the young players that got a little bit of run here. We did see Noah Clowney. We did see Jalen Wilson. We did get a 5-man lineup that has to at least have fans thinking about the road ahead and what is possible maybe for a youth movement here in Brooklyn. We'll get into all of those things and so much more in just one moment. Before we do, though, got to ask the question, are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little bit further? Have you ever wondered what adventures could be waiting just around the next corner? Our friends over at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. For example, the 2024 Nissan Rogue is the perfect vehicle for city drives or great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting to your phone. The Google Assist, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are all built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. And the 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. Or maybe you're a little bit more of a 2024 Nissan Pathfinder, has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing. My goodness. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Also, got to let you know about Fire TV. Why? Because it is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as on the Fire TV stick that you can just plug right into your existing TV, and provides access to millions of movies, TV shows, as well as free live TV. I have it. I use it. I love it. All of my apps are all connected right in through there. Great central hub with access to all the kind of entertainment that you're looking for. And of course, Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channel lets you dive into all of the game analysis highlights and more, just so you can keep up with what? To date on all the latest from the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and a whole lot more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out the Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireStickTV. Okay, so as we continue the post-game podcast for the Locked On Nets and for the Brooklyn Nets, getting that win in overtime, 122-119, have to just highlight here a couple of key contributors and really critical sequences, right? So we get the moment here late in the fourth quarter. It's a missed bucket going at the basket for Cam Thomas. You're thinking maybe can give a little bit of a cushion here, get the Nets that 2-point advantage. Instead, it goes the other way. And in a tie ball game, it is Nicholas Claxton who absolutely engulfs underneath the basket, gets the clutch block, and things happen so quickly that you almost maybe lose sight of the fact that he needed to be there in that moment. And it is a somewhat, rare set of skills, transition defense, scramble kind of basketball, his athleticism, that body adjustment and control. It's what gets him that block in that key moment. Then you fast forward into overtime. Not only does he get a monstrous putback off the missed triple early in the session, he also turns right back around, grabs another block on the defensive end. So Nicholas Claxton's fingerprints all of a sudden get really put all over this game. And he started it fairly quiet and then really exploded in the second quarter. We've seen this from Nicholas Claxton at times, right? You're not always going to see the impact possession over possession, but then you turn around and we're talking about a kid that gave you 37 minutes, 8 of 11, gave you 9 defensive rebounds, 13 overall, also kicked in, as we say, 2 steals, 3 blocks, and had 17 points overall. So an absolutely massive contribution from Nicholas Claxton. And really, if you're going to be a player in his vein, who obviously doesn't have the complete offensive repertoire, isn't going to be expanding it out to the perimeter and forcing defenses to come away from the basket, to protect against his perimeter shot. Okay, fine. Then you need to have these moments. And he absolutely did it. Monster performance from him when it mattered most. And you're not getting across the line here when you think about that Cam Thomas 38-point game. You need these type of performances in behind him. Now, I also want to talk about Trendon Watford here, but if we stay inside the starting lineup for one more minute, I already highlighted Mikal Bridges, right? At the end of it all, 7 of 16. Listen, some of the familiar things where he's struggled, like trying to get those little what feel like gimmies at the rim. He did have a clutch steal on the defensive end, transitioning it into a nice put through for himself going the other way. So there were little glimpses. And I think in totality, when you get to the end of this one, you think about 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 19 points. Hey, if we can be in that kind of mold where your scoring is not coming, somewhat deceptively. I mentioned at the top about garbage time points when it doesn't really matter whether you're losing or winning by a significant margin. But more than anything, remember Cam Thomas, who explodes to start this game. You need the contributions from Mikal Bridges, from Nicholas Claxton. Dorian Finney-Smith has a quiet night in this one. We'll get into the bench here in a moment. But you need guys that kind of pick up the possessions. And that's the difference here. Because you could even see in the second half of this one, it was becoming hard for Cam Thomas, right? Now, that's because he's doing a monster lift. He outshot anybody else on the team, right? 27. The next closest is going to be Schroder, who we'll talk about here in a minute. Schroder, excuse me. 19 shot attempts. So he's doing a lot of the lift, right? He's getting onto these switches. He's trying to drive into the teeth of the defense, into bigger bodies. He's taking a lot of hits. He's going to the ground. He has the sore back. And if you're going to talk about having lulls in games where for 4 or 5 minute stretches, which the Nets did have over 3.5 minutes in this game where they went without scoring a bucket, that's how all of a sudden you start to erode a really good performance from Cam Thomas because you're not getting balanced contributions from others. So, Dennis Schroder, 43 minutes, 8 of 19, 3 of 6 from deep. Remember, just 30% for the team. He's one of the rare guys who actually knocked down some shots in a meaningful way there, walked into a step-up triple. Now, he's the guy with the ball in his hands at the end of the fourth quarter. Whether or not you want that thing in Cam Thomas's hands and living with the result, obviously, he can do a lot of creative things there. Again, I wonder if the fatigue plays a factor. And frankly, Schroder had been able to create space for himself as well. So, but when you turn around, 8 assists and 21 points, This is when we talk about it from the micro level of this game inside of this season. But fast forward, remember, Schroeder's going to be under contract next year for this team as well. And that's meaningful. Do I think that he's going to be in the same type of role a year from now? Well, we might hope not. But if he is, this is what veteran, experienced players can give you: consistency, game over game, and a reliability when you need to have someone else pick up that baton. And frankly, in a way that Mikal Bridges has not been able to do, especially over the last month of basketball. Now, there was a lull after Schroder first came over in the trade. When we went back to his initial debut, hey, some nice flashy things. But think about it right now. I mean, and listen, these last two games have been great for him, right? A combined 15 of 34 from the field in those games. 3-point shooting wasn't good against Toronto. But again, he's a guy that gets to the line occasionally, only 2 times tonight, knocks them both down, though, in a clutch moment after the foul. So you want those opportunities where you can rely on. I think he's an 82, 83% career free throw shooter, 4 for 4 in the game prior, but 15 assists across those last 2 games, right? In the course of the month of March, he's shooting 43% from the field. He's shooting almost 38% from beyond the arc, and he's dishing out almost 7 assists per game, 15 points. You need someone who's a key contributor like that. He has only had a sub double digit scoring performance twice over the entirety of March, and he sprinkled in 20 and 30 plus point performances along the way. He's a veteran, he's consistent, he's reliable, and we've seen him at times in timeouts, in between breaks, in the huddle, galvanizing guys, talking and communicating to players. He just has that type of, I think, energy to him that players gravitate towards, and you need that type of vocal leader who can go ahead and step in and be that for you, and then ultimately produce on the court, right? Doesn't matter. You can be everyone's favorite player in the locker room. If you're not doing it when it matters most on the court, then it really doesn't make that much of a difference. Now, that being the case, this was a quiet night for another starter in one Dorian Finney-Smith, though I thought defensively he did some solid things across his 36 minutes. Only 4 points in this game, had 8 rebounds, did miss 2 what could have been very critical free throws. Unfortunately, I mean, for the Brooklyn Nets, it did not come back to haunt them off of those 2 missed free throws late in the overtime session. That being the case, those are all your starters and how important they were to this game. Coming up here in a second, let's talk about Trendon Watford, because we just got done saying how he is one of the young pieces. He has a little bit of an erratic style to his game, but he played under control and did a lot more than what we saw in the box score. That plus the very young core sample that all Nets fans should be excited about. Getting into that coming up here in just one moment. Now, this next segment is brought to you by our sponsors, BetterHelp. Sometimes we just need an opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let it out, especially to someone who's unbiased to your life. So obviously today, as we often do, I want to tell you about something that I've been feeling a little bit anxious about. Recently took on a new position, expanding my content coverage when it comes to the regional sports, New York sports area. And that comes with new expectations. It comes with a new schedule. It comes with a new opportunity that certainly starts to rattle around my head about, am I prepared? Do I have all my ducks in a row? Do I have my time management down? And am I creating the content that I know people are going to enjoy and want to come back and engage with? Therapy can be different for everyone. And most of us have bigger problems than just our favorite sports teams winning or losing a game. And it's important to make sure you get those things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, so as we tie a bow on Locked On Nets post-game podcast, Brooklyn Nets 122-119 overtime winners, toe-to-toe. Jordan Poole, by the way, just give the nod here, because I listen, man. I talked about Cam Thomas, the best player on the court in the first half. It looks like he is just a walking bucket, but obviously there's adjustments. And Jordan Poole, man, he turned this thing back around. Not that he was having a bad night, but he ignited just like Cam Thomas was in the first half. Over 45 minutes, he goes 15 of 24, 5 of 12, some clutch buckets from deep, especially in the fourth quarter and overtime. He has 7 rebounds, 8 assists, 38-point performance for him. You had Kuzma kicking in 24 as well. And one of the things that we get to avoid talking about on a night like this is how the Nets transition defense was absolutely atrocious in this game, right? The lack of awareness off of missed or made buckets was really alarming. Now the Nets got a little bit better with it in the second half. Pretty disturbing stuff in the first half. It has been a theme for them, and then also things in and around the basket, right? One thing that I won't over harp on when we talk about Mikal Bridges is we say, hey man, if Cam Thomas is cooking and you're spacing the floor, put yourself in a good spot, get the open looks, have easy shots, and find a way to be a consistent contributor. The defensive component of this, though, is I mean, he got taken off the dribble several times in this game. Excuse me, as I fumble over my words because it's a little bit confounding watching Mikal play sometimes. The same thing that we talk about on the offensive end for him, where, by the way, when the spacing was there, he has to hit the open shot he can. When he tries to create and pull up for his own looks, it's a starkly different result, right? Defensively, like we said, offensively, he doesn't have that shiftiness, right? Not going to create his own space, not going to burn past somebody going to the rim. Well, think about it going the other way. He is going to get burned going to the rim sometimes, right? And that, of course, presents a long-term potential problem. But you hope as you start to bring these pieces in around him, it'll balance things out a little bit. And you think about some of the young players that the Nets have here. Trendon Watford, as I mentioned there, when you look at his stat line, 19 minutes, 5 of 7, 2 of 3 from deep, nice looking rhythm threes when he had the looks, just 2 rebounds, couple of assists, a steal, a block, an impressive block, by the way, sweeping across the lane. Like, I don't know if people realized, again, kind of like Nick Claxton in terms of like the unseen athleticism because you're used to maybe seeing it. He stepped through the lane, Trendon Watford, to kind of get a flyby block that ignited a transition opportunity for the Brooklyn Nets. 12 points. It's just 12 points. And it's funny because coming out of the last game, when Doug and I were talking about the young players, we were looking at a guy like Trendon Watford and saying in totality, hey, this is a guy that plays with high energy, high motor, but can be a little bit erratic. Remember, in 21 minutes the game prior, he had 19 points and was 7 of 10 from the field and 2 of 4 from deep and had 7 rebounds. So there's so many things that you would look at there, including the 5 personal fouls and the 4 turnovers, right? So you can't just say, well, 19-point performance, look at the high shooting percentage. This guy needs to be X for the team going forward. But in a game like tonight, we're in 19 minutes, 0 turnovers, only 2 personal fouls, really playing within himself. That was critical. It was also critical that he was the guy outside of Schroder that they looked to do some of that ball handling, get the ball out of Cam Thomas's hands, especially in the second half for possessions, because we're not there yet where Cam Thomas can be your pure on-ball point guard for 48 minutes, right? And that's maybe not the perfect role, not the ideal role, and the roster isn't constructed perfectly either. But Trendon Watford is one of the better ball handlers. So for the minutes that he's on the court, you have that ability, if you're Kevin Ollie, to look to him and say, hey, bring this thing up, get our sets working here, get the ball away from Cam Thomas so they can't do the blitzing defensive actions. All those little things matter here. So a really good performance from Trendon Watford in this game. And it's beyond the box score where you say this one to me is more impressive than the game prior because he played within himself, played under control, and gave this team the contributions it needed off the bench. You can make a case, by the way, that I'm not playing in control on this podcast episode. I've got the energy. Why? Because the Brooklyn Nets won. That's all I ultimately ever really care about. We getting these wins and we feel like we're moving in the right direction. Here's the other big one, though. At one point tonight, I didn't want to leave without saying it, and Doug and I will certainly probably extend this conversation, maybe get into it more on the next off day, knowing that we can kind of expand if this feels like something we'll see more of down the stretch. Now, it's 11 minutes for Clowney. I'm not going to really harp on it. He's 0 for 4 in this game, by the way. Had 4 rebounds, though. We saw some nice sequences for him on the defensive end. Opportunities on the offensive end. Only takes 1 3-pointer. It takes 2 3-point attempts here. I'd like to see some of them go down. We know the lumps are going to be there. I don't fault Kevin Ollie for getting back to his core here in a tight basketball game that you want to win, right? I'm not an advocate of giving away a game that is there for you to win to get the young players run, but I think it's still important that you find ways to carve out these opportunities. There was a stretch in this game, as brief as it was, where we saw Nicholas Claxton, Noah Clowney, Jalen Wilson, Trendon Watford, and Cam Thomas. That is a 5-man lineup where Nicholas Claxton is the oldest guy on the court. Yeah, I'm actually thinking about if Jalen Wilson is older. than Nicholas Claxton. 11. No, because he's only 23. Claxton's 24. There you go. Anyway, that 5-man lineup. Is that the starting 5-man unit for the Brooklyn Nets? No, of course not. But you have all of these players that next year, regardless of what you do this offseason, are going to be contributors. We're already seeing the footsteps here. Clowney, again, is playing at the 4. He's sharing the court with Day'Ron Sharpe. He's sharing the court with Nicholas Claxton. So you're already seeing that role being carved out here. You're also seeing how much athleticism and length that they can bring into these situations when you have Clowney, Claxton, and Watford specifically, and then you're utilizing Jalen Wilson. That still brings you good size, instinctual rebounding, right? Good floor spacing. The three-point shooting hasn't been there of late, but you expect it to still be where it was when he first came in, that blend of it, still shooting over 33, 34% on the season. And then you have Cam Thomas cooking, right? These guys can be contributors for you next season. Starters, bench players, role players, whatever it may be. And getting that little sample size is something I hope we get another sample size of before the season concludes. Now, were there bad moments inside of that sample? Of course there were. Did they have turnovers? Yes. Did they get a little disjointed offensively? Of course they did. Because while Noah Clowney and Jalen Wilson played together at the G League level, Trendon Watford didn't, Cam Thomas didn't, and Nicholas Claxton, even though he's been playing obviously with Cam Thomas and with Trendon Watford, with Jalen Wilson to a lesser extent. Well, now I've got Noah Clowney, and specifically defensively, there's a different dynamic that we need to sort out, of different expectations, different versatility when you have Clowney on the floor as well. So get some of that sample now. Let them learn now at the NBA level. So when we get into the offseason, we get through the draft, we get into next year's training camp, and we hit the first game of 82 next season, we already kind of have a sense and a rhythm about where these guys are going to plug in. So really, really just love to see any sample size on the young guys. And 11 minutes for Clowney, 8 for Wilson, 19 for Watford. That's good. 14 minutes for Day'Ron Sharpe. Of course, he's going to give you 5 rebounds across that. He's going to give you 8 points. Those things matter. And above the break, 3-point attempt doesn't go in. But I said we want to see him continue to take those looks as well. You don't have to squint too hard and think about the different combinations that can exist. And ideally, potentially be successful for whatever stints you're going to use them for. So got a little bit of everything in this one, which I always think is fun. Most importantly, that you got the win. And the last reason why, before we get out the door, is that when you go over to Tankathon and we talk about the NBA, talk about teams winning, talk about teams losing. Well, it matters that you get that win because it pulls you a little bit closer. Utah has lost 6 in a row. They're 29-43. So maybe you can push yourself out to that 9th spot here potentially. You're not really going to get any closer with Atlanta at 10 or Chicago at 11 there, but you are trying to get a little bit distance from the 7th and the 6th seed. Toronto lost again as well. They've now lost 12 straight by them, by the way. And if you get yourself down to that 9, well, it's only a 20.3% chance at a top 4 pick for the Houston Rockets where you're sending it, and only a 4.5% chance at the number 1 overall pick. Listen, you can tell me it's a weak draft class, but every single win matters if it keeps you further away from giving the best of the weak draft class to the other team. That being the case, I'm going to go lay down. I feel like I need a nap. We will be back again, obviously, as we said, talking about maybe some of these young player lineups, things that we like coming out of this one. And hopefully the Brooklyn Nets just getting a little bit of good vibes going out the door here, because it has not been the season we expected, but winning games at least gives some reprieve to the fan base now. 28-45, 12-26 on the road. We will not be talking about one of the all-time great poets because, when there is no Doug Norrie, there is no quote. Short of saying that I miss my friend, and I can't wait till he's back so we can keep talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball. Basketball.